customer support and professional services for SEA. I'll be doing just a few slides of intro and overview before turning it over to Doug Berg, who will do the bulk of the technical presentation. For our agenda today, really, I'm just going to talk about the current trends that we've observed as vendors in this area for so long, the trends that we've observed in mainframe batch processing and why it's so important to keep your testing tools current and relevant, and why it's so important for the vendors like SEA to continue to invest heavily in these tools to help our customers achieve the goals that they're achieving in an ever dynamic, changing marketplace. We'll then turn it over to Doug, who will give you the details and get into some feature function capabilities of the Plus Pack, and particularly JCLplus, to explain how and show how the features and functions of the product can really help address specifically the goals that you're trying to achieve. And it'll also talk about the deployment capabilities that we have and help you get there from where you are today. So let's talk a little bit about what we've observed in the market and current trends, and talking with our customers, doing presentations, seminars, and all the exchanges we have globally with folks throughout the IT industry and the mainframe area. Well, number one, a little joke here, right? Here it is, 2019, and I think that most of you on the call here or listening to the webinar recognize that the mainframe is not going away anytime soon, as many folks predicted. In fact, the mainframe is still, at the very least, mission critical for most mid to major organizations in the world. And why is that? Well, with so much web app and mobile application development, why are the mainframes still critical? Well, it's really a pretty straightforward answer, and the answer is that even with all the application data and with all of the the interfaces that are provided to users via these mobile devices and web applications, all of that data has to come to the back end, and it's typically to mainframe computing to process, because the mainframe computing environment and the platform really is the platform that has the power and the capability to process the many millions of transactions that occur on a given day for many large organizations. So, but however, the challenge is that these web applications and mobile applications necessarily are changing on a daily basis, right? They're providing capabilities that we all love and use on a day-to-day basis. New ones are coming out all the time, and therefore new data, new capabilities are also being pushed back to the mainframe to process. Well, all of these initiatives, and a lot of them revolve around DevOps and agile initiatives to develop applications more quickly and release to production more quickly. All of them are putting pressure on the mainframe side to do the same thing, to be able to accelerate the changes to mainframe apps that support these front-end applications, and be able to provide the same processing flexibility that the web apps and the mobile apps provide. However, historically, we know that the mainframe, over many 50, 60 years of management and steadfast high production quality capability, the procedures and the processes that have been developed over time typically call for a much longer development and QA life cycle, right? And therefore, it's kind of a disconnect between the web app front end and the mobile app, high dynamic, quick changing, and then the observably slow back end mainframe piece that's plodding along and making sure that what goes into production is high quality, and therefore we don't move things, we don't change things very quickly. Application life cycle there, maybe things change once a month, maybe once a quarter, and that's just not going to cut it for the folks who are doing the high end, high dynamic changes on the front end. So we've got to get a balance there, and that comes into play with regards to DevOps initiatives and agile initiatives on the mainframe. What can we do to help that? API economy is where we are today, and that's really what's going to drive and help these front end applications along with the mainframe to be able to communicate and be able to drive those newer applications that then can communicate the data back to the back end and have it processed as necessary by the large capable mainframe processors. The ultimate goal then, and the ultimate requirement, is that in order to ensure that we can release applications more quickly on the mainframe, is driven by the testing capabilities of the developers. You still have developers working mainframe development, of course, doing changes to those applications, but they're doing it from different platforms. Maybe they're doing it from IDEs, your interactive development environments, like IBM's IDz or CompuWare's Topaz. But they are using testing tools from and requesting the services of the mainframe from many different platforms beyond just the typical green screen. So they have to be able to request and receive that service in a highly reliable fashion and a highly robust fashion, such that they can find defects more quickly and be able to ultimately promote those mainframe applications more quickly to a QA environment that finds and eliminates the defects much more quickly, so that you can then release more quickly to the mainframe production environment. There's even a push by IBM now to use Java on the mainframe for the scripting language, as opposed to, we all love JCL. There's now potentially the ability to use Java to take advantage of some of the offloading of the processor, and also take advantage of the skills, the Java skills that are much more available typically nowadays than JCL. Talking about why and what these tools need to do, and when we look at all the things that are happening in the IT world today, and necessarily so in the areas around development and changing of development in the mainframe world, you need to have testing tools that are dynamic enough, that are flexible enough to be able to find the defects and find all of the defects where and how the developers need to use the tool. And I mentioned earlier about being able to do the testing from an IDE, maybe from a web application, certainly, of course, as well from the green screen, of course. But we know today's skill sets are coming from younger generation, for one, who, they need to do mainframe development, but their comfort level is typically in a more of a GUI type of a presentation. And so the testing tools need to be able to adapt and need to be able to provide an environment for testing that they're comfortable with, right? And that's where the vendors like SEA have to continually invest and make sure that we are providing the most robust, the most flexible, and the most dynamic tool sets so that the developers can achieve the goals that they need to. And this really includes a number of areas. One is I mentioned the Eclipse plugins for IDEs, so that from that kind of a platform, the developers can, while they're developing or changing their COBOL or Java or whatever it might be, that they can also feel as easily comfortable in doing a point and click and scan and validate their JCL, simulate the JCL in any environment in which it's going to run on the mainframe, and also make sure that all of your test cases are generated automatically so that you can, again, accelerate the productivity, accelerate the capabilities of the developers so that they are not just finding and working with the application that they're in, but automatically identifying interfaces to other applications, to other areas within their own application that they maybe didn't know about or weren't thinking of, and being able to automatically have the tool generate the test cases that will then go through and identify any defects that might have existed. At a very fundamental aspect of these testing tools, like JCLplus, is that if you're going to approach the mainframe management folks and say, hey, we want to be able to release these applications not once a month, not once a quarter, but maybe once every 2 weeks. In order to do that, you've got to build a case, a real case, not just flowery, we think we got it working here. You have to show that your testing tool and the development work that you're doing is indeed identifying defects and identifying all of the defects sooner than you had been doing before. So metrics generated by the tool, that is metrics that show I found this many errors. I found this person or this group is doing the validation on this job and these procs, and these are the kinds of errors we're finding, and et cetera, et cetera. Tremendous amount of data that then can be evaluated and show in graphical form trending, so that you can take reports to management and say, look, last month or 6 months ago, we had this many errors, and look how we have this tools now that give us the capability to find errors that much more quickly, and our trend is showing that it doesn't take us a month now to do QA, we can do it in a week. And give the management of the mainframe, the release folks, the run folks, give them the confidence that we can indeed release to production sooner. In addition to just your normal runtime simulations and tactical errors and the other types of security validations and things like that, another very important aspect is your standards as well, your site standards that ensure that there's consistency throughout. And Doug will touch a bit on that as well as we go forward. Finally, this illustration is showing you a JCL lifecycle, source lifecycle, if you will. It may not look exactly like yours, but it's certainly conceptually typical. You have a testing phase, you have a production, a QA phase, excuse me, staging, and you have production. And what this illustration is showing is that at each stage in the life cycle, you have opportunities to do testing and to validate that what you are indeed working on and moving through the life cycle is indeed free of defects, so that you have, again, the tools that allow developers that when they're working on it to, let's say in a foreground, an edit macro, or in a point and click time frame when they're just starting to work with JCL, they can quickly do a scan, quickly find defects and correct them as they go. Then they can, as they request move through the product to the next stage, to the QA stage, they can request that it be moved, and then you have a batch capability, typically done by your source control management systems like Endeavor or ChangeMan or Rational Team Concert or udeploy or any of those that would then invoke in a batch way the same testing tool and validate that on the image that it will actually run, validate that there are no defects from a runtime simulation integration with all the other operational support products like your scheduling variables, your security, your DASD, et cetera, all those types of resources that are going to be required, that you indeed meet all the requirements of them. You don't have any defects related to that. All of that can be done then in a batch mode by that source movement tool, so that you can ensure that when it does essentially release to production, that you have zero defects related to your JCL processing. And that ultimately, in a nutshell, is the entire reasoning that you have the best tools in place, that you have the tools accessible from the platforms on which the developers are going to be working, and then you have the most highly reliable tools and highly reliable capability for finding defects and for correcting them available to your developers. That gives you your accelerated, at least a very valid argument for accelerating your batch application release to production. Now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug Berg, who is one of our senior technical analysts, to talk about PlusPack, and particularly JCLplus, which indeed has all of the attributes that I just discussed, and those that you would need to employ. And Doug, take it away.
Thank you, Sal, for that introduction. As Sal mentioned, we're going to be talking about PlusPack, but in reference to PlusPack, we're going to be concentrating in today's session in reference to JCLplus. As you can see here on the screen is a architecture of the product, and with JCLplus, you'll see directly below that the cylinder is what we call a common control data set, where the product is configured to your environment, and at the same time you can store your standards, and your standards can be either in our proprietary language, SEL, Standards Enforcement Language, or if you have REX, you can use REX, and of course we also support COBOL and Assembler. And then with XREF Plus, which provides you the as-needed types of documentation that you would need for special projects that come up. Maybe it's a cross-reference report that you need for a data set, for a program. And that information can then be stored either in a non-DB2 repository file or a DB2 repository file. And of course, as Sal had mentioned, we have the various means of how you can interact with the product. And you have the batch process, the panel process, you have the edit macro. And at the same time, we also give it to where you can utilize the product, such as in a PC window by utilizing the plugin. Now, with JCLplus, we support the leading management systems. We support the leading schedulers. And with the schedulers, if you have the various symbolics, we'll resolve those symbolics for you. If you generate a forecast listing, we will interface with that forecast listing. And the same thing is true for the security, may it be RACF, ACF2, or top secret. And at the same time, Sal mentioned about your JCL lifecycle. And we interface with those change control packages such as ChangeMan, Endeavor, SCLM, and so on and so forth. So you can integrate JCLplus with these sources in that promotion of your JCL. And we also support DB2 statements and IMS to where we can do the validation for you. Let's start with JCL Plus and what it comprises of. And the components that are within JCL Plus are the following. You have the JCL syntax checking, where we will emulate what would occur if this job was to be submitted to MVS. And that is, we will detect the various types of syntax errors as well as the logic errors. Those being, does this data set exist? Does this program exist? How about the proc? And at the same time, we're going to do the complete checking of the JCL from the job card to the last JCL statement in your JCL. At the same time, we also help you enforce your JCL standards. We have the proprietary language that I mentioned, SCL, but if you have something more complex that needs to be handled, then you can utilize Rex. And of course, there's still the COBOL in assembler. We also provide you the JCL editing and reformatting. And what that means is if you have JCL changes that need to occur, you can make those changes on an individual basis, that is, an independent member, multiple members, an application, or your nightly forecast. And at the same time, you can incorporate to where you can do concatenations. You can remove steps. You can add steps. And at the same time, for various types of conversions that other customers have done, they converted from JES 3 to JES 2. So there's a lot of capability within the JCL editing and reformatting section that we'll cover later. And at the same time, as I mentioned with the reformatting, you can have the JCL make it easy for you to read and everyone to understand. Now, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner, we have various flexible modes of how you can utilize JCL Plus. And in this example, we're going to utilize the edit macro JCL Plus. And you're just going to be in simple edit mode of a data or of a job and or a proc. And you would just enter in JCL Plus, hit the enter key, and we're going to show you a holistic view. And within this view, you're going to see in the upper right-hand corner the highest return code that was issued. We're going to let you know the configuration, a library, and the member that's being used that I mentioned in the architecture slide. And at the same time, we're going to show you an error tally, and within that tally, it will show you the various rules, that is standards violations, warning messages, as well as errors that may occur. We also give you an error summary, and within that error summary, it shows you here are all the errors or warning messages or standards that occurred within this job. And if this job is calling in procs and includes, we're going to let you know all the errors that would occur in those as well. And as you can see in this example here, we show you the syntax errors. We'll let you know about programs not found. If you're an SMS shop, we'll give you the SMS validations for data classes, management class, storage class parameters that you may define in your JCL, as well as checking your VTOC. And in this example, we're letting you know that the GDG base does not exist. Now, if you were to submit this job before utilizing JCL Plus, you would get these types of errors. And again, what you want to be able to do is be proactive and find the errors before the job actually gets submitted to MVS. As I mentioned earlier, with JCL Plus, you have the standards enforcement, and here's an example of an SCL. And with this SCL, what I want to do is interrogate the job card. And within the job card, I should say I want to interrogate the job name. And what I want to look at is the last character of the job name. And at the same time, I want to compare it with the execution class that's on that job card. And if they don't match, I want to issue a return code 8, and I want to issue the following text so that you will then get the results that you see below, where you see the XRP 0354 rules violation. It's a return code 8, and it says job class invalid for a test job. Now, if you have something more complex, we also support the Rex language. And with the Rex language, you can utilize the various PP Rex API drives as well as the advanced automation solutions. And when it comes to the standards, we will assist you as well in putting these together. With the change facility, like I mentioned, you can make changes to your JCL on an individual basis or as a application or as a nightly forecast. And in this example, what I want to do is interrogate at the DD level. And what I want to do is if the DSN node equals prod, what I want to do then is change it or set it to test and issue a return code of 04 and say dataset high-level qualifier has been changed to test. Like we mentioned about the JCL lifecycle, when you're taking production JCL and move it into test, maybe you have to make these changes to your JCL. Maybe parts of the job name also has to have a T in it. Maybe the execution class has to be T. And then, of course, the first node of the dataset names all have to be with the word test in the first node. So you then would see the results over here to the right that you got two rules violations, standards, and at the same time it's letting you know that it's changed it from prod to test. And if you like the results that you see here, you can do a PF3 and then it's saved for you. Now, besides the standards enforcement, there's also the reformatting capabilities. And here, maybe you have a standard for the job card. That is, you may want certain parameters to be on certain lines. If you have comment cards, maybe those comment cards have to be in a boxed format. At the same time, you might have a common alignment. That is, you want the DD to start in columns 13 and 14. All DD statements and continuations to start in column 16. And at the same time, you can reorder these DDs. That is, you can put them in a particular order that you want. Now, how you do that is in this example here. At the top of the screen, you see a DD order. Within that DD order, you're going to indicate, here's the program name. Here's the first DD I want to have, followed by, in this case here, sysset1, sysset2, sysset3, sysset4, and sysprint. If you have any other DDs, they will then follow the sysprint. Now, to the left, you see the model job card. And here's the example of how you can set up to where you want the job card parameters to be on a separate line. And the first parameter will always be class, followed by message class, message level, and notify. Directly to the right is the format, and the format gives you the capability of your renumbering of your line sequence as well as the incremental sequence, such as you may want it to say start at line 100 with an increment of 100, or you can have it unnumbered so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you incorporate these three functions within reformat, your JCL will then look like with what you see down here at the bottom of your screen. And with that said, as you can see, this is much easier to read and understand, as well as if you're in a meeting to where the individuals can then look at this and they'll understand it when it's all in a nice format. Another means of execution of the product in the various modes we provide is within batch. And within batch, here you can indicate you want to do a nightly forecast. You may want to say, I want to do some validation of an application, and or maybe just a set of jobs within an application in the execution order that it would occur if it was to be submitted. The flexibility with batch that you see here is that at the sysin level, you can override anything that's stored in that common data set that I mentioned earlier in the architecture to where how you would set up the product. Here I can indicate the type of report that I want to see. I can indicate the selection criteria that I want to use. I can define a JCL library name and or a proc name because maybe I just want to validate or simulate the validation of the errors within a proc library or within a JCL library. As I mentioned with the reports, within the edit macro JCLplus, you can type in a subparameter of JCLplus space report. What it will do is provide you a subpanel that will follow up where you would then pick and choose the format of the report that you want to see. And in this example, I've selected the message summary and the flow chart. So you now see the results of the batch run that I just did. And again, this batch run could be of, like I said, an application, a set of jobs, or of a nightly forecast. And within the message summary, in this particular case, I'm seeing that I have two types of errors, or I should say informational, which is a return code 0, and warning message of 4. And then directly below that is a flowchart. Of course, that's in the IBM HIPAA format, which is to where all your inputs are on the left-hand side, all your outputs on the right-hand side, and of course, your processor, or in this case here, the program, is going to be in the middle. There's also a facility called BR Jobs. And what the BR Jobs let you do is you can process a series of jobs, such as an application. And within that, you then store that within a data set or sequential data set, as you see here at the top of the screen. You can then indicate BR jobs, and what BR jobs will then display for you is in the bottom half of the screen, here are the jobs that I selected or processed in the batch run. It's letting me see that in this first job, the number of errors that occurred. It lets you know the highest return code. It lets you see all the errors that are within that particular job. And you can then select the error or errors, make those corrections that are necessary. Now, at the same time, we also provide you, like I mentioned earlier, XF cross-reference types of reports. And of course, these types of reports will be used on an as-needed basis. And these reports could be a data set cross-reference. One of your projects or tasks is a particular data set is now going to be obsolete, is going to be removed. And you need to know all the where uses. That is, where is this data set used in the job, in the proc, as well as in the includes. So you can then go in and make that necessary changes that are needed. We also provide you the same thing for the program cross-reference. Maybe IBM's going to come out with a new utility to replace IEF-BR14, and you need to know all the where uses in the applications that you support. Let's say payroll. And maybe within payroll are 30, 40 jobs. Now you want to know is where is IEF-BR14 used within these jobs, within these procs, so I know where to make these changes so you can expedite that change process for you. We also have additional tools for you, and they're called the PDS update, which is basically a high-speed search and replace utility. And there's also the compare. And what the compare does is compares two PDS members. And let's say these two PDS members, one is production and one is, let's say, QA. And these two PDS members have to be identical. Well, in this example, you'll see the F1, job 1, and F2 for job 2 are different. That is, in job 2, I have more DDs than what's in job 1. Now you have to determine, interrogate it as to, do these DDs need to be moved into production, and or do I need to remove them? Now, Sal briefly mentioned in reference to the trends, and JCLplus reports data that you've generated can be used to create various matrix types report about your environment. And in this example, you'll see two different types of graphical reports that you can create to where you can see the various types of errors that are being encountered. And here in this trending analysis, you can see is on the 14th, I had this number of rules violations. I've had this number of warning and this number of errors. And the emphasis here with these types of graphs is here's JCLplus finding these types of errors before you physically submitted these jobs to MVS. In other words, JCLplus found these errors that you prevented from occurring when those jobs were submitted. Now, JCLplus plugin, it allows the use of JCLplus to syntax check your JCL from an Eclipse-based environment, and you can explore that output generated by JCLplus via the screen here. With it, you can point and click as to what you want to choose from. That is, you can pick and choose different ZOS environments or remote LPARs. You can do the validation over there and get the results on your screen. And at the same time, you can include your standards, which may be required. And the report view shows you the report, which includes the statements, the messages, and the contents of the execution of the procs, and includes, and of course, if they're nested procs, nested includes, we're going to expand those for you as well. And the errors that are displayed are going to be in various colored formats that you can pick and choose. So with that plugin, you can extend that functionality of the validation in the runtime simulation. And in this example here that you see is in the middle, this is per se the raw JCL in edit mode. And over here in the outline is the JCL. And at the same time, if you want, you can pick and choose the proc as well. Directly below here is an Explorer view, which you can pick and choose the type of view you want to see down here. And then, of course, here's the various types of JCL that's available for you to simulate the actual errors that would occur if the job was to be submitted. Excuse me. Now, again, in this slide here, you will see in the middle is the JCL in an edit view. What I can do is right click. And when I do a right click, it gives me a pop-up and I can drill down here to where I can pick JCLplus, to where I can say, check the JCL. Or if you have IDCAM statements or sort statements all by themselves, we will validate those sort statements and IDCAM statements for you. In this example, I'm selecting I want to check the JCL, and it then gives me another pop-up which says my target. That is, which ZOS LPAR do I want to execute this job on? I can pick and choose a standards program. May it be SEL, Rex, COBOL, and or Assembler. And then what I can do is then click OK, and it will then give me the results that you see over here in this blue screen. And within this blue screen, it's showing you, here's the job in a view mode. Here are the types of validations that I encountered. And of course, directly below that, again, is still, over to the right of it, is your JCL still in an edit view. And then directly below that, I've now changed my view to where I want to see the markers, or I want to see the errors that are in this particular job. And with that said, I can then do a correlation between the two. That is, I've selected this error. It then points me to the error, which then points me back to the root cause, where I can then make the correction, do the simulated run again, running it through JCLplus, running it on another remote LPAR, and then getting the results back here in my view mode. Now, let's say you have overrides in your JCL. How that would look when you're utilizing the plugin is the following. you will see that there is a line through some of these particular DDs. And with these lines, that's telling you that there's an override. So when you then go over and look at the view of the JCL Plus process, it's showing you here's the sysint DD dummy, but here's the override and the data that's part of that sysint data. So you can now make that correlation between the two and at the same time go back into the JCL itself in the edit view. And if you need to make changes, you can make the appropriate changes there. A few slides earlier, I mentioned about the JCL Plus Explorer and the types of views you can select. And those types of views you can select from are an outline like we just saw in the prior slide. Whoops, let me go back. I can select the message dashboard, which then shows me here's all the errors. And those errors can be syntactical errors, logical errors, such as dataset not found, program not found. And you can point and click on these errors, and it will then show it to you in your left-hand view. I can also select from a program reference or a dataset reference. So again, with the plugin, you can point and click and choose the information that you want all from a PC window. Now, earlier we talked about BR Browse, and you also have that same functionality within the plugin as well. And as you can see here, on the left-hand view, it's showing you here are the members and all the errors within the members. And these members, of course, being jobs. It's letting you know the highest return code, and you can then click, and then in the edit view, it will then show you the information that you may want to make changes to. Now, JCL Plus also shows you the proc program dataset correlation. So you can then pick and choose that information from over here to where you can then, in your edit view, make the appropriate changes. Now, you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, it doesn't say JCL Plus, and it talks about XF Plus DBR. Within the JCL Plus plugin, you have the capability to where you can drill down even further to get various types of cross-reference information. Again, may it be data sets, procs, programs. And we will discuss this further in another seminar that we'll be having next month. Now, as Sal mentioned earlier, IBM has developed a means of where you can develop application based on Java batch job specifications language editor. That's a mouthful there. Anyway, the JSL enables you to define the steps in a job and their execution order using an XML file. And over here, you will see an example that shows how you can define a simple job that contains one step and one task step. And here you'll be able to validate your JCL as well as create flowchart reports. Okay, now if you are interested in implementing the best practice approach towards JCL management and optimization, we provide you the following. That is, we provide you a 30, 60-day project. We assist you with the statement of work. Within that statement of work, you're going to have the various major tasks and milestones, and we will assist you with each and every one, from the beginning to the implementation, to the testing, to the training, to the actual sign-off. Now, since we still have some time left over, I noticed in the left-hand corner of the webinar that there's an icon of questions, and some people have been asking some questions. And at this time, I'd like to address a few while we still have a few minutes here. And one of the questions is, let me see, if we have two different business units using their own set of standards, how can your product handle that? Well, there's several ways of how you can do that. One option is if you're in edit mode and you're using the JCL plus edit macro, you would type in JCL plus space options. It will then give you a pop-up panel where you can then pick and choose the standards that you want. Now, if you're running this in batch, you can put that in the batch process. And the same thing is true if you're using the panels. And at the same time, as I mentioned previously pertaining to the plugin, when you say you want to do the validation within that plugin, you pick the remote LPAR you want to process, and below that is where you would then select the standards you want to use. Another question, which I believe I already answered, is can JCL Plus handle procs and includes? The answer is yes. IBM gave you all the capability years ago to where you can have nested procs, nested includes. I believe it's like 15 deep. That is a proc calling a proc calling a proc, and an include doing the same thing as well. We will expand all of those procs, all of those includes, and do the simulated validation for you. So you would then be able to correct them before the actual execution occurred. We need to suppress messages from occurring, or can we even change the severity? The answer is yes. Depending on the language that you use, the SEL, the Rex, COBOL, or assembler, you can pick and choose the severity that you want, and or you can define to suppress a message, such as if I see data set not found for test.db2.control, I want to change that severity from an 8 to a 7, or maybe I may want to suppress it. So you can conditionally change the severity as well as conditionally suppress, or change all and suppress all. It's your site decision on how you would like to handle that. We have scheduler variables. Does JCL Plus integrate with TWS? Yes, when I showed you the slide pertaining to the interfaces, I mentioned the leading schedulers. A lot of those schedulers have their own, per se, variable symbolics. And we will interface with that scheduler, in this case TWS, do the resolution of those symbolics, as well as utilize the nightly forecast. So when you scan the nightly forecast with JCL Plus, we will resolve all those symbolics, let you know any and all errors that occurred so you can rectify them, correct them before these jobs physically get executed, because the emphasis with JCL Plus is to be proactive and to find the errors before they're encountered on MVS. Here's a good one. Can we add or delete entire steps with JCL Plus? Yes, the answer is with the JCL edit functions, you can do that, as well as if you have certain, let's say, concatenations that you want. JCL Plus, JCL edit can do that for you in making those types of changes. May it be a deleting of an entire step, or you may want to include an entire step. Another question pertains to ChangeMan and how does it work? Well, in your JCL lifecycle, your promotional or change cycle can be that you take your production JCL and you move it into test. When you integrate JCL Plus within ChangeMan, is you'll have a step execution to where these jobs are going to be changed from production, let's say data set names, to test data set names. You'll do your changes there, do your simulated validation. From there, you may then move it from test to dev. And you'll do the same thing with JCL Plus. Make the changes, do the simulated runs. Once that is clean, move it on to QA, and the same thing there. And then you'll continue that life cycle into promoting it back into production. And once it's back in production, run JCL Plus to simulate those errors so you can correct them to prevent them from occurring for when you submit your batch jobs. I noticed there are still many questions popping up, and I'd wish I could address each and every one of them, but we will answer any and all questions that you have, and we will get back to you. With that, that concludes today's session, and I want to thank each and every one of you who sat in on this session. And again, if you want us to help you optimize your JCL, please give us a call. Thank you.